The 11th chapter of the book of Shmuel Bet continues. We're in the midst of a war. David and Yoav and his army have defeated the Arameans who came to help the Ammonites. But we don't know that Ammon has been defeated, the ones who started this war, the ones who shamed the emissaries of David, who wanted to show kindness to them. And that's where we continue. That's in the midst of what is going on in the story we're supposed to happen. That's the backdrop in the background. So chapter 11 begins, Vahi l'tshuvat hashana. And it was at the return of the year. It's not exactly clear what it means, the return of the year. But what's important about that season is la'et seit hamalachim. It's the time that the kings go out to battle. So so this is when the snow, if we were talking of Viking history, when the snow melted and they could get on their boats and leave Norway or Sweden and go and attack England or other. That's the time of the year. It's whatever time it was, and I'm sorry, maybe it's springtime, I don't know, but it's the time the kings go out to war to win victory and to gain more land and gain more wealth. Vayishlach David et Yoav et Abadav imo ve'et kol Yisrael vayashchitu et bnei Ammon vayatzuru al Rabbah v'David yoshev b'Yerushalayim. So what does David do? It's the time to go out to war. So he sends Yoav, his general, he sends all his army, he sends all of Israel, and they go and they fight and they destroy Ammon and they besiege the city of Rabbah. And David is staying in Jerusalem. We pointed out yesterday, the whole war, David didn't want to attack the Ammonites. David wanted to show them kindness, but his act of kindness was not understood, was not taken properly by the Ammonites. And now and that's what started this war. David at first doesn't go out to war. In the end, he does go out to war against Aram. But here again, it's the time, and it tells us this is the time the kings go out to war. David should be going out to war. He doesn't go out to war. He stays at home in Yerushalayim. And when you stay at home, and you're bored, and you have nothing to do, oftentimes trouble happens. Vayi la'et ha'erev, and it's evening time. Vayakam David me'al mishkavo vayitalech al gag beit hamelech. And David is walking on the roof. He has nothing to do, so he's looking out at the sights. He's up on the roof. Vayar isha rochetzet me'al hagag, and from the roof, he saw a woman who was bathing. Vayisha tovat mareh me'od. And the woman was not just attractive, she was very attractive. She was extraordinarily beautiful. David sees her bathing. And so he sees her in the nude. And again, she's not necessarily doing anything. She's not doing anything wrong. She's bathing. He's the guy who's on the roof. I don't know if he intended to be a peeping Tom, but certainly that's what we would call somebody who's looking through people's windows from the roof in the modern world. And so David should be out to battle. He's not out to battle. He's up on the Gog. Remember the Gog in the past, the roof. Shmuel took Shaul up to the roof, told him how he's going to be a king. And what did we point out? When you're up on top, when you're on the roof, there's only one thing that can happen. You can only fall from the roof. You can't get any higher. And of course, Agag was the name of the king that caused the downfall of Shaul. And here David also is up on the roof, and things don't look very good. Vayishlach David. Now he sees her, but now he does something not so nice. Vayidrosh liisha. So David sends, and he asks, who is this woman? Vayomer halozot Batsheva bat Eliam eshet Uriah Hachiti. That's Batsheva, the daughter of Eliam, who is the wife of Uriah Hachiti. And those last three words say something important. She is somebody's wife. She is unavailable. Vayishlach David malachim vayikachel. Nevertheless, David sends messengers, and they take her. And the word kach means to take. We could say it's the word is abduct. And kicha also in the Torah is an allusion to marriage, when a man takes a woman. And so David takes her. We'd say he abducts her. He intends to, in a sense, marry her, certainly act as her husband is supposed to act. Batavo a love, and she comes to him, vayishkav ima, and he sleeps with her. Vihi mitkadeshet mituma, and she was purified from her uncleanliness. Vatashav el beita, and she returns to her house. So David can sleep with her. She's not menstruating. She's not, right? She's gone to the mikvah. But David can't sleep with her because she's a married woman. And David just sends her home. She just goes home. And maybe remember this in a future chapter. David tells her, sleeps with her, and then says, goodbye. It was nice knowing you. This is not an act of love. This is an act of lust. This is an act of desire. David acting upon his urges. It's a time of war, and he sees this woman. And think about just one of the things in the Torah, one of the strangest laws in the Torah, in back in Parshat Kitetse, is the law where we're told, the law of Eshet Yifat Torah, that a person can go on the battlefield, and if they see a woman they like, they can sleep with her, but there are all sorts of questions surrounding it. Do they have to let her nails go long? Do you have to let her hair? Does he have to show that he loves her? Here, David is supposed to be in battle, and then maybe we'd say, in a sense, the Eshet Yifat Torah, the captive woman law would apply to him, but he doesn't go to battle. He's at home. He doesn't need the captive woman battle. He's not with a bunch of men who are all virile and, they're killing and they want to have some sexual activity and they see women on the battlefield, right? There are a lot of babies in Vietnam born, 50 years ago that look kind of American. So, right, David here he should be out of battle. He's not. And even what the Torah, the allowance, the very complicated and difficult and challenging morally allowance the Torah gives us, David is using it in a sense, even though he's not at battle. Vayishlach David el Yoav, verse Hey. Vatahar ha'isha, and the woman conceived, she became pregnant. Vatishlach vataged leTavid, vatomer hara anochi. She sends a message to David and she says, I am pregnant. And note, in this whole story, these are the only two words she's going to say. There are all sorts of questions in the story about Bathsheba. How do we look at her? Was she willing? Was she compliant? Was she willing? Is she, in a sense, raped? I don't know if it's the classical, but, she certainly didn't. She had no choice in the matter. The king sends for her. She comes to the palace. The king sleeps with her. This is not a relationship where she could just say no. And these are the only two words she uses. All she says is, I am pregnant. Vayishlach David el Yoav, shlach elai et Uriah Chiti, vayishlach Yoav et Uriah el David. So David sends to Yoav, and he tells Yoav, please send Uriah Chiti home. Okay? David's impregnated his wife, and so David says, I got to talk to the guy, right? And Yoav, of course, complies. Why not? And Uriah comes home. Vayavo Uriah Ela, vayishal David l'shalom, Yoav u'l'shalom ha'am u'l'shalom ha'melchama. And Uriah comes to David, and David starts asking him questions. How is Yoav? How's the army? How's the war? What's the latest? Tell me what's going on. Okay, so David's shooting the breeze with him. Does David say to him, oh, by the way, I slept with your wife and she's pregnant? No, because David here is not admitting his sin. What is David trying to do? This is all a ruse. Verse 8, Vayomer David le'Uriah, Reid leveitcha, urechatz raglecha, vayetze Uriah mibeit hamelech, v'tetzeh acharav masat hamelech. David says to Uriah, okay, listen, you already came back. I wanted to report. Go home, wash your feet, go see your family, right? He says, go to your house. And we obviously know what David is intending. Go home, sleep with your wife. Nobody will know who the father of this child really is. And so Uriah goes home, and the soldiers follow him, right? They followed him there. Vayishkav Uriah petach beit hamelech et kol avdei adonav v'lo yarad et beito. But what happens? Uriah does not go home. Uriah goes and he sleeps at the entrance to the king's house, to the palace, with other servants. He doesn't go home. So word gets to Uriah, word gets to David that Uriah didn't go home, and David calls him back and says, Uriah, I don't understand. You came from the journey. Go home. Go to your house. Go say hello to your wife. Go see your children, right? This is, there are TV shows in America in the 20th and 21st century about soldiers who come home or are sent home so they can see their kids, they can see their families. You have the opportunity. Go see your wife. He doesn't say to him, go have a conjugal visit, but that's, of course, what he wants. Vayomer Uriah, and here are such great words. El David, Ha'aron, V'Yisrael, V'Yehuda, Yoshvim, Basukot, V'Adoni Yoav, V'Adei Adoni al Pnei HaSadeh Chonim, V'Ani avo el beiti lecho, V'Lishtot, V'Lishkav, V'Mishti, Chayecha, V'Chei Nafshecha, Im Eset HaDavar Hazeh. Uriah says, and look, you never know here. Does Uriah really know what happened? Probably not. But for the reader, we see this as such a reprimand of David. Right? What does he say to him? Israel and Yehuda are sitting in tents, right? In temporary structures, in Sukkot. And my master Yoav and all of the soldiers of your master are in the field, right? Are in the battleground. And I'm going to be here and I'm going to go eat and drink and sleep with my wife. I swear by my life, I would never do such a thing. Wow, David, what are you doing here? All your soldiers are out at war. And you're sleeping with married women? How could you do such a thing? Now, again, we don't know that Uriah knew what he was saying to David, but as the reader, we read and we say, wow, you really told David what he's doing wrong. Vayomer David el Uriah, Shei bazeh gam hayom u'machar eshlechecha vayeshev Yerushalayim bayom hahu mimocharan. And David said to Uriah, remain here today, and tomorrow I'll send you. Maybe hoping he goes back home, but I think David at this point realizes that Uriah is not going to go home. And Uriah stays in Jerusalem until the next day. Vayikra lo David, and David calls with him. Vayochal lefanav, and David eats before him. Vayesh vayishkerehu, and David eats, and David gets him drunk. What does David try to do? David tries to get him drunk so he'll go home and he'll sleep with his wife. David tries to give Uriah, we would call it today, he tries to roofie him, right? That's what he wants to do. Vayhi baboker, and it's the morning, and obviously Uriah does not go back home. Vayichtov David sefer al Yoav vayishlach biyad Uriah. David writes a note to be sent to Yoav, and he gives it to Uriah. So David here has attempted to cover for his sin. I slept with a married woman. It's not good if it's going to come out that I slept with a married woman and that I impregnated her. Let me try to get her husband to sleep with her, and then people will think that he's the father. Baby is born after 8 months, 7.5 months. Nobody's going to ask any questions. She won't say anything. Nobody will know, and all will be fine. But Uriah does not comply, does not feel right being home, enjoying himself, sleeping with his wife while all of Israel is on the battlefield. And thus he refuses, and thus David has to send him back to the battlefield. And David sends him with a note. And what does it say in that note? Verse 15, Vayechtov b'sefer lemor, havu et Uriah mul pnei hamilchama chazaka v'shavtem me'acharav v'nikav amed. What does David say? Send Uriah on a kamikaze mission. Place him in the forefront of the fierce battle, and then leave him there, and he will be killed. And so, right, Uriah comes home, gives the message. Uriah doesn't go home. Uriah goes to the battlefield, not knowing that he's carrying this paper, which is confining him to death, condemning him to death. And he gives it to Yoav. And when Yoav sees that there's a bad time in the war and a bad place where it's very dangerous, he assigns Uriah to that place. And that's what Yoav does. Vayetzu Anshe Ha'ir v'elchamu et Yoav vayipol min ha'amei avdei David v'yamat gam Uriah achiti. So Uriah is there. These soldiers, these strong Ammonite soldiers come out. They kill Uriah. They kill a few others. Right? Yoav puts him in a position that doesn't look good. And Yoav, we've talked about Yoav a lot. Yoav's great qualities. He totally defends David. He'll do anything to defend David. He'll do anything to defend the monarchy. So David tells him, kill this loyal soldier. He kills a loyal soldier. Maybe Yoav realizes, I don't want to make it look good. So he's not only going to have Uriah killed, he has other soldiers killed as well in that battle to cover up the sense that really this was just supposed to be about killing Uriah. Now Yoav sends a message to David about what's going on in the battle. And he tells the messenger, when you tell him, this is what happened in this offensive, and this is what happened with this, and this is the food we need, and this is the weapons we need, whatever it is that the message that he's selling him, at the end, say to him as follows: Vayam talach hamat hamelech v'yamar lecha madua nigashtem et ha'ir lilachem alo yadatem et asher yaru me'al hachoma. So when you tell him the report that unfortunately these soldiers died, and David asks you, the king asks, why'd you do this? This was not a good strategy. This was not a good plan. How could you do such a silly thing? Why would you do such a silly thing? If that's what's said, then what do you have to respond to the king? Mihi kat Elimelech ben Ruveshet halo ishai shlichu alav pelech rechem me'al hachalma vayamat batevetz lama nigashtem el hachalma. Right, and if David continues, we'll talk about the story back in the book of Shoftim. Who killed Elimelech? Elimelech was the one who fancied himself king of Israel, and he went and he was standing outside a tower, and a woman threw down this huge millstone on his head, and he's on his deathbed, and he says to one of his soldiers, kill me, so that it doesn't say that I'm going to be killed by a woman, right? So, right, if he's saying, why would you approach the wall? That was a silly thing to do, right? If David says to you, why would you do such a thing when you tell him about the battle and you tell him about what happened? V'amarta gam abdecha Uriah hachiti meit. Then just to add at the end, oh, by the way, when this battle occurred, also King David, your servant, your soldier, Uriah hachiti, died in this battle. Vayelech hamalach. Now the messenger, I don't know, is that supposed to appease David? Is that supposed to make David angrier? The messenger here, there's one of the cases, many cases, messengers don't know necessarily what they're saying. But the messenger goes, and he tells him all the message. And he tells them, we were right, the soldiers came out, and we were by the entrance of the gate, and we saw the shooters with their bows and arrows, and the soldiers from the army died, and amongst the soldiers of the army who died was your servant Uriah Hachiti. Now, the soldier, again, the messenger might be thinking, David recently asked for Uriah to come home. David may have a close relationship with Uriah. Maybe that's why he's adding the thing about Uriah, but it's unclear to the messenger what's going on and why he's being singled out. Vayomer David al-Malach, Ko tamar al Yoav, al Yeira beinecha davar hazeh, ki chazo v'chazeh tochal acherep, hachazek milchamtcha el ha'ir v'charsa v'chazkehu. And what does David say? A very callous response. Because David, of course, doesn't want everybody to know the reason why this offensive, this failed, this kamikaze mission, this terrible offensive happened. What does David say? This is the way in war. This is what happened. People die in battle. That's just the way that it is. And that's not the response of the king of Israel about his soldiers. That's not what it's supposed to be. What happened to the person? And yes, they were specific soldiers and they were great men, crying about Avner, crying about Shaul and Yonatan. Why is he here so callous? Vatishma ishat Uriah ki meit Uriah isha vatispod al ba'ala. And the wife of Uriah, she's not even identified by her name, Bathsheba, hears that Uriah, her husband, was dead, and she mourns for her husband. Vayavor ha'evel, and when the mourning period, Shiva, is over, vayishlach David vayasfal beito, vatihilo liisha vateled lo ben. So David, what does he do? I guess you could say, in a sense, it's the right thing to do. But of course, it's just one bad thing after another. David sends the messengers to get her, sends his officers. They get her. They bring him to her house. She becomes his wife. And of course, she was pregnant. She has a child. And then we end the chapter. This is all David and Yoav and Uriah and Bathsheba. But there's somebody else who's important in the Tanakh at times. Vayera, the last words of the chapter, Hadavar asher asa David be'enei Adonai. And what David did was bad, was evil, was wrong, was displeasing to God. Nobody else saw it. Nobody else knew exactly what happened. Yes, there might have been some servants. Yoav might have known in some way, but God knew. You can't hide from God. And God, who has always been with David, who has always been with God, now God is unhappy with David. He's unhappy with what David's done here, and rightfully so. And this episode will begin an incredible downfall of the kingdom of David, which we will read about for the next 10 or 12 chapters or whatever, the struggles and complications that occur in the aftermath of this terrible sin.